The suspected leader of ETA's military wing has been arrested in southwest France. Mikhail Cabecot's Carreras Arobe was detained in Bayonne with two other people thought to be in the armed Basque separatist group. It follows an early morning police raid on an apartment there. Some media reports say a fourth person is also being held in the joint French-Spanish operation. Rescue teams have found the bodies of 28 people underground after Monday's explosion at a coal mine in Turkey. Initial indications show they died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Two other miners are missing, but authorities say there's little chance they've survived. Rescue efforts have been intense at the site in the northern Black Sea province of Zonguldak in Turkey, a country in which mining disasters are common.
Dawn and a quiet but smoke-filled central Bangkok emerges from a nighttime curfew after yesterday's military crackdown on anti-government protesters. Fires still burned. This was Asia's second biggest department store before the red shirts torched it as the troops moved in. The army had used live ammunition. 7 people died in the clashes, with another 60 wounded. Witnesses say up to 9 bodies have been found in a temple where many protesters had sought sanctuary. Thailand's Prime Minister appeared on television to offer reassurance and to tell the people his government would put an end to the problems. Wednesday's unrest has been described as the most widespread and most uncontrollable political violence Thailand has ever seen, and it spread beyond the capital to provinces up north. With several of the red shirt leaders arrested, it's now unclear if the protests will continue. There is still much anger among Thailand's rural poor, who want rid of their non-elected government and are calling for fresh elections. But further unrest could suggest a new phase in the country's political crisis and even greater damage to one of Asia's most thriving economies. South Korea has officially blamed North Korea for the explosion on board one of its naval ships, which caused it to sink last March, killing 46 sailors. A detailed investigation cites overwhelming evidence that a North Korean submarine fired a torpedo at the Cheonan. For its part, Pyongyang has denied any involvement. But at a press conference in Seoul, military and civilian investigators presented a selection of items recovered from the scene of the sunken vessel. South Korea is now expected to push for the case to be referred to the United Nations. Its options are limited if it's to avoid escalating already heightened tensions with its northern neighbour. While the United States has backed its ally, North Korea has threatened to take strong measures, including war, if the South insists on further UN sanctions.
A knife-wielding man goes on the rampage in a room full of Chinese children. This isn't the latest attack on youngsters in the country, but an exercise aimed at improving self-defense skills that could save their lives. Pupils are being prepared for the worst amid public alarm over a spate of school killings. First of all, I have to avoid direct confrontation. That's why I should try to run away first. If the attacker gets hold of me, then I can use the defense techniques I've learned. Children are small, they're not strong, and they can't run very fast. That's why we've come up with these defense techniques. The main thing is to preserve their lives. Last week, 7 young children and 2 adults were hacked to death by a man wielding a meat cleaver at a kindergarten in northwest China. He apparently lashed out after a row over the lease. Since March, 27 people have been killed in a string of attacks on Chinese schools.
As each day passes, more oil from the leak in the Gulf of Mexico is washing up on Louisiana beaches. Fears are growing that this environmental disaster will turn out to be the biggest the United States has ever had to face. Wildlife groups accuse BP, the owner of the rig which exploded last month, of holding back information on the real size and impact of the slick. Huge amounts of crude continue to spew from the ocean floor, despite several attempts to cap the well. Back in Washington, lawmakers are growing frustrated with the lack of progress in containing the mess.
We've seen tar balls actually in Texas, so what we're doing is fighting an omnidirectional and almost indeterminate threat here.
Forecasters say some of the oil slick has entered the powerful loop current which curls round the Florida peninsula and could take it to Miami and Cuba within days. Florida's pristine coast is braced for the impact. In a sign of the widening environmental threat, the US has nearly doubled a no-fishing zone to 19% of the Gulf's stateside waters. BP is clutching to the news that at least it's now siphoning off 3,000 barrels of oil per day from the well, but it's a drop in an increasingly polluted ocean.
In one of the largest mass protests since the fall of communism, around 50,000 Romanians took to the streets of Bucharest on Wednesday. They're furious at drastic cuts to state wages and pensions proposed by the government to reduce the country's ballooning budget deficit. I'm a pensioner after 40 years of working, and they want to cut 15% of our pensions. Protesters say they shouldn't have to pay for the government's corruption, but the government says its hands are tied. Romania's deep in recession and has already received one instalment of an IMF loan package in order to be able to pay wages.
It was the government's decision to move ahead with concentrating more on the expenditure cut side. They feel that expenditures have gotten out of control in recent years, and the best way to attack their budget problem is to concentrate on the expenditure side. This was their decision.
The government says it has to make savings or it won't receive the much-needed second instalment of the IMF bailout. But pensioners in Romania feel the state has gambled away their living, leaving them fearful for the future.
Germany's best-known television weatherman has been charged with aggravated rape for an alleged attack on his girlfriend. Jörg Kachelmann, who is a Swiss presenter and popular throughout the German-speaking world for his lively weather reports, is accused of sexually assaulting his partner at knife point.
Hierbei habe ein Messer zur Drohung eingesetzt.
He's alleged to have threatened her with a knife. There are wounds to the throat region. The charges are especially grave.
Der schweren Vergewaltigung und auch der gefährlichen Körperverletzung.
51-year-old Kachelmann has his own weather forecasting company and has revolutionised the way weather is presented and explained on television. He's made it accessible and even turned it into a form of entertainment. The authorities say Kachelmann could face up to 15 years in prison if found guilty.
Global air travel disruption caused by Iceland's continually erupting volcano is beginning to wear a bit thin. So, scientists have come up with some weird and wonderful ways of stopping Mother Nature in her tracks. One hypothetical scenario, helpfully illustrated with this graphic mocked up by Icelandic television, involves plugging the volcano with a giant ice sheet until the eruption ends. Back in the real world, it's not just air travellers who are facing upheaval. Livestock grazing in the surrounding mountains are having to be moved to uncontaminated pastures. It's a massive undertaking, as a local farmer explains.
It's
unfortunate because sheep have a tendency to return to familiar pastures where they grew up, so sometimes they wander long distances looking for home. We're just hoping the fences keep them in. So while many travellers aren't going anywhere, the journey for these little lambs is just beginning.